Today we get to solve, we're going to solve all the problems between women submitting to men and men submitting to women. It's all going to be solved and settled here this very night. This is where we ended up last week. This is a section where Peter is talking about how Christians are supposed to live in a really messed up world. And so he's going through these different groups of people and explaining how each group should submit to people in their lives. He talked about slaves submitting to masters. He talked about wives submitting to husbands. And in 1 Peter 3, verse 7, he's talking about husbands submitting to wives. Now, the word submit is not in verse 7 when it speaks to husbands, but that's what it's talking about, because it says husbands in the same way be considerate and et cetera, et cetera. When it says in the same way, it's talking about submitting with the same attitude as the slaves and as the wives. So Christians who like to be who are more patriarchal don't like to talk about how the husbands have to submit as well, but that's what it says. And in Greek, it's really clear. So it's talking about how each group needs to submit. Slaves submit to masters, wives submit to husbands. Verse 7, husbands in the same way, that is, husbands, you also need to submit yourselves, and this is how you do it. Be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So husbands have to submit too. And we talked last week about what is verse 7 saying? And the key thing here is, what does it mean when it says that wives are the weaker vessels? What does that mean? I mean, your translation might have something a little different, but it's going to say that basically. So what is Peter saying? That submit to wives as the weaker vessels? What does it mean? And I left you with 4 options that are, not the only options on earth, but they're common options that good Christians have offered throughout all of Christian history. So option 1 was, well, women are the weaker vessels in that they're just not as smart. That's option 1. It's a misogynistic approach in Victorian era, like the late 19th century. A lot of commentators said, women are dainty, they're delicate, their minds aren't as tough, and they're just pretty little things, and that they're delicate little flowers. So that's what it means. Women are just weaker mentally. So that's an option. And way back when they weren't even like that. They were just like, yeah, women are dumber. So like in the 6th century and stuff, I mean, really ridiculous. That's how culture influences you. So that option 1, that's one option. Women are just not as smart. That's why they're weaker. Option 2 is that, well, women are physically weaker. So you should be considerate, you should be understanding. They're just not as strong. So that's option 2. I actually can't remember the 4th option.
It's more of just a man is built where he can do more lifting and do that type of thing, where a woman is built differently and there's emotional differences.
Yeah, so that's a lot of people say that, talk about that. Okay, so now I remember the other 2. I'm sorry. So option 1, option 2, option 3 is that this is a more common one now that you'll hear, is that women are psychologically weaker. They're not, less intelligent. They're just psychologically weaker than men. And I think that's dumb. And I think that's really ridiculous. So I mean, if you think that, then we can talk. I don't mean to be too dismissive, but I don't think that's true. I don't think any man that knows any woman can really say that with a straight face. So I don't think that women are psychologically weaker. The 4th option is that women are weaker because they're in a weaker position. They're more vulnerable because of this. So they have less, especially then in Peter's day, they have less protection in society. They don't have a safety net, and they're just more vulnerable. The husbands can do a lot more to them legally than they can do to their husbands. So those are 4 options. And this isn't just an academic thing. You know, what is Peter saying? Peter tells us we should treat our wives a certain way. Well, what's he saying? So this is a real question. And the way you can figure this out is what makes the best sense of what Peter is saying. He says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. Does your translation might say live with your wives according to knowledge? Or does someone else have a different translation?
This is the King James, is dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the
Okay.
Lord as we confess over.
Okay, so understanding, the NIV has be considerate. I think the King James has, you know, dwell with your wives according to knowledge, which is a really literal translation. Does someone's translation have something different?
I don't have anything different, but what your 4th point and what you just said, society treats women different. Within your home, I know my wife, you know your wife, I know that whatever society thinks about her, 99% of it's probably wrong. And I should recognize my wife for who she is, what she does. The reality of my wife, not the perception that society has of women in general.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, Marion?
Christian husbands are to demonstrate toward their wives the same unselfish spirit as Christian believers.
Yeah, you're reading a study note, right? Yeah, yeah. So what the Greek says is according to knowledge. But what does it mean? And all these translations that people said are the translator's way to try and get across, you know, how do you dwell with your wife according to knowledge? And so what most of them done is say they seem to be saying, you know, be smart about the way you deal with your wife, be considerate, be understanding. That seems to be what he's getting at. So if you're trying to tell husbands, like husbands in this day when wives have no rights, like much worse than now. So, I mean, a really bad situation for women where they don't have a safety net. Their husbands can do a lot of harm to them, and the wives don't have a lot of legal protection. So they're you know, they're more vulnerable. You know, the rug can be snatched out from under them. And there's not much they can do about it if that happens. So they're in a bad, you know, vulnerable position. If Peter is saying, listen, be considerate and understanding and treat them as the weaker vessel, which of the 4 explanations makes the most sense in light of the time and the circumstances where Peter's writing? Would it make sense for him to say, because all that's true and women are dumb, you should be considerate? Does that seem to be what he's saying? Does it say, you know, because all that's true and women can't lift 50-pound dumbbells, you should be considerate? Like, I mean, like it's true that women aren't physically as strong, but is that really what does that have anything to do with what he's saying? I mean, does that have anything to do with what he's really probably talking about? So that's how you try and figure out which of the 4 seems to make the most sense in light of what Peter's saying. But Phil was going to say something. Yeah.
Number 4.
Oh, 4. Okay. I thought you were raising your hand. Okay.
About all the things that a woman does, as far as taking care of her family and weaving her clothing and selling stuff, and it gives her full credit for being who she's capable of being.
Mm-hmm. Which one does?
But that chapter, I can't think.
Oh, Proverbs 31?
Probably.
Yeah, it's Proverbs 31. Yes, yeah. So does Arlene have anything to contribute, or Christy, do you guys have any thoughts before we move on?
You have to have a virtuous woman. I am. She's, all the things she does, I didn't.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, we shouldn't belittle them because they are fellow heirs too, to the
Yeah.
eternal life. And we didn't talk about that. but
No, yeah,
that's
we're
part of it.
going to. Yeah.
I hope it's not a rabbit trail, but I think there's another verse somewhere that, well, there's 2 sides to it. One is, I mean, women submit to your husbands as the church submits to Jesus. And on the flip side, men should be, what's the right word? I think maybe honoring and protecting other wives to even to the point like Christ being willing to give their life to save them.
Yeah, so that's Ephesians 5. Yeah, so that's Ephesians 5, 21 to 35, I think. So yeah, that's Paul. And he's getting at the same sort of thing. Stormy says, sounds like they need to be reminded to treat wives of decency, so Paul put them in a subordinate role to make it easier to accept. No, I don't think that's what he's saying. Peter's not presenting husbands being in charge of wives here. He's not saying anything like that. He says wives need to submit to husbands. And here in verse 7, he says husbands also need to submit as well. And they submit to their wives by being understanding and caring. And now we get to what the weaker vessel thing means. I think Peter is saying they're more vulnerable. They're much more vulnerable position. You're in a position to do a lot of harm to them if you want to, and they can't really fight back against you. So you need to be extremely considerate and understanding with your wives. Why? They're heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. They're not lesser than. They're not second class. They are co-heirs with you. They're equal with you as fellow inheritors of the gift of life. You can't domineer over them. You have no right to treat them as trash. You have no right to you have no right to hold your superior status in society as a man with legal rights over them when they don't have them. You need to be considerate and treat them as though they're co-heirs. They're equal with you. I don't think that Peter's saying no. I don't think Peter's saying anything here about how wives are subordinate to their husbands. I just don't think he's saying that. I think he's saying each needs to submit to the other in different ways. And that's what he presents. Husbands submit to wives, wives submit to husbands.
Right. Yeah, and in this part, yes, definitely.
Arlene's
Because
waving it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, just talk. Sorry, just talk early. Yeah.
I can't talk over you.
Yes, you can.
No. What I was thinking of is our cultures through the years, there's a lot of things that carry forward. And in the same way you've been talking to us in your sermons about being a counterculture, this to me is kind of the same thing that Peter's doing here, because these people are set apart, they're different, we're Christians. So regardless of how they're behaving, what you're used to seeing in the people around you, you need to be different. And I don't think that's any different then than it is today. We still see these same things happening today. Look at the backlash women had back in the social revolution time of the 70s and stuff, with burning their bras and what have you, and standing up for women's rights that's been going on and never leaves. It's that same cultural kind of thing that has enveloped many societies, because that's the human situation. But being equal with your partner, being equal with all men, women and men being the same, but men need to be treating their wives differently, regardless of what culture you're in, if you're going to be a Christian following what God's plan is, what he's set forth to tell us. That's, I think that's really what he's doing here. If we look at it from our more modern, look at history, it really doesn't change. It's the same today as it was then. So I think he's, sorry.
And to show her honor and to be patriarchal, it's not compatible.
Right.
Yeah, does anyone else have anything? Yeah, I think this issue deserves more time than this issue is bigger than just what Peter says, because there's other passages of scripture too, but also this issue, I don't know how big of an issue it is with the people here at this table. But this issue has caused so many problems, because you have people going off into a ditch on either side that I mentioned last time. One is you have people who are very conservative Christians who want to try and take back lost territory because they see society going crazy, and society doesn't know what a man is. Society doesn't know what a woman is. There was the Supreme Court justice, the newest one, Judge Justice Jackson, at her confirmation hearing a year or two ago, when she was asked, it was a loaded question, but she was asked, "Can you tell us what a woman is?" And it was asked by a senator who was just looking for a soundbite. You know, she wouldn't answer the question. She wouldn't answer the question because she didn't want to give him the soundbite. But the point was still that, you know, we can't even say what a man or a woman is anymore. So you have these very conservative people who are reacting against the stupidity in our culture, and they're zooming way in on a more patriarchal. They're like, I think they're correcting to a more patriarchal. The husband is the one who's in charge. The wife is subordinate, and it's a very strong sort of, the husband's in charge, the wife is subordinate. They're emphasizing the wife's subordination a lot because they're trying to recapture something that our society has lost in its madness. And then you have our culture, which is gone totally crazy and doesn't even know what a man or a woman is. And so you have all these Christians reacting against the craziness, trying to recapture the way things used to be, and maybe paying less attention to what the Bible actually says, and more about wanting to go back to like the 19th century or something. And what the Bible actually says can kind of get lost. What Peter's presenting is what Arlene said. It's totally countercultural. It's not normal in Roman society. But what he's presenting is a couple where each submits to the other. Each one submits to the other according to who the other person is and what that needs to look like, but each is submitting to the other. It's not one dominating the other. Each is submitting to the other with reverence for God, out of love. And that's what Peter presents. And that's what we need to try to make real, what God wants Christians to make real. Wives submitting to husbands, and husbands submitting to wives. And the danger is to fall off the ditch and become hardcore patriarchal and domineering, and or to just take what the world's selling and just not even know what a woman or a man, men and women are anymore. But I don't think that, I think one of the most countercultural things that husbands and wives can do is to do what Peter says and try and make this real in their lives. So how about that? It's solved. It's all solved, all of it. But we could,
Well, then how much of this whole discussion goes back, all the way back to Satan? Dividing men and women.
yeah, that's, I think what you see is well, in fact, I know what you see is, I don't think Adam and Eve were confused at all about how they're supposed to interact with each other until the fall. And now, ever since the fall, there's all this confusion. The husband oversteps and becomes a domineering tyrant, loser, bully. The wife oversteps and becomes this domineering tyrant, and the husband, you know, becomes a mouse and goes and hides somewhere, you know, and that's the marriage. And you know, so there's this seesaw back and forth where the way things are supposed to be is all messed up because now we're sinful people in a sinful world. Adam and Eve weren't confused. Adam and Eve were supposed to exercise dominion together, like together. God didn't tell Adam to exercise dominion while Eve made sandwiches. He told them both in Genesis 1. You both take dominion and subdue the earth. But ever since the fall, that's all been messed up because we're messed up.
And to sum up everything previous, verse 8, and in response to what you just said, verse 9.
Okay.
Have a bad argument with my wife. It's not my fault. It's her fault.
Yeah.
Get angry.
So, but yeah, so I'll read verses 8 and 9, and then we'll see if there's any other last comments, and then I think we can finish chapter 3 next week. It says this. So this is the summary of what Jeff said. Finally, all of you, whoever you are, slave, master, husband, wife, whatever, be like-minded, be on the same page, right? Be on the same page with one another. Be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Everyone needs to be humble. Everyone be compassionate. Everyone have love. Everyone have sympathy. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing. And we'll talk more about that next week.
Yeah.